2. Discover your emotional intelligence. Chapter 3. The Emotional Intelligence Appraisal. Testing for emotional intelligence. We must not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we began and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot. When you test people for emotional intelligence, you quickly learn that they tend to take the results very seriously. When people take most tests that measure something other than intelligence, a personality test is a good example, they can feel good about the results no matter where they stand. An emotional intelligence test is another story. When we share with someone how emotionally intelligent she is, it can be a threatening experience. Even a skeptical executive who just heard the term for the first time that morning knows that a low score is trouble. This concern is well-founded. An ample body of research worldwide demonstrates that emotional intelligence is critical to success, both at work and at home. Why create a test that seems to put a box around someone's emotional intelligence? Mostly because people want to know. Emotional intelligence is drawing a tremendous amount of attention around the globe because it hits home and is real for people. It's easy to understand why emotional intelligence is important. Human beings were made to feel. More people search for emotional intelligence on the internet than they do for John Travolta, The Tonight Show, or flat-screen televisions. The TalentSmart.com website alone receives more than 100,000 hits each month from visitors who are seeking to learn more about emotional intelligence. We all have some idea of how we come across to other people, but even the least self-aware among us realizes that self-perception is generally tainted by how we want things to be. An emotional intelligence test provides an objective evaluation of behavior. It shows how we come across to other people and how we handle the situations that matter most. Measuring your emotional intelligence moves your learning beyond a factual or motivational exercise. When you know your score, the experience of developing emotional intelligence is more real, relevant, and personal. The value of testing your emotional intelligence is akin to learning the waltz with an actual partner. If I tell you how the dance works, you're likely to learn something and may even get the urge to try it yourself. If, as I show you how to do a waltz, you practice each step with a partner, your chances of remembering them later on the dance floor go up exponentially. The emotional intelligence profile you receive from taking the test is your dance partner in developing these skills. It will remind you where to step with every beat of the music. As you listen to this audiobook and move beyond it to develop new skills, it helps to reflect on where your emotional intelligence stands and which skills you need most. No test can determine this for you, but your profile will help you understand your strengths as well as the skills that will provide you with the greatest opportunity for improvement. If you take the emotional intelligence appraisal that comes with this audiobook, you will expand your knowledge of your ability to understand emotions and your tendencies with different situations and people. There will likely be a few surprises in your profile. Some may sting a little, but everything you will learn is to your benefit. Your results will increase your self-awareness and open the door to change. The Emotional Intelligence Appraisal. How does it work, and how do I complete it? The greatest of faults is to be conscious of none. Thomas Carlyle. The first thing most people notice when taking the emotional intelligence appraisal is that it's very fast. The average time required to complete it is just 7 minutes. We have been both praised and scolded for the length of this test, and are happy to report that its speed does not mean it's a Cosmo quiz. Your scores in each of the 4 emotional intelligence skills are accurately measured by your answers to just 28 questions. We could add more questions to please the critics, who believe a psychological test must have at least 100 questions, but they would just be filler. Years of research have revealed that the test is the optimal length to measure your emotional intelligence without wasting your time. Do I have to take the emotional intelligence appraisal? Absolutely not. The emotional intelligence strategies discussed in this audiobook are not dependent upon your knowing your emotional intelligence score. While the test provides additional insight into your emotional intelligence skills, you can easily develop them without taking the test. The test is provided to deliver a new, objective perspective of your behavior. It can be used as a supplement to what you learn in this audiobook, but by no means is it required for you to be able to reap the benefits of what you read. If I take the test, what will it tell me? First and foremost, the test will tell you which skills are your strengths and which areas can use improvement. You will learn more about your tendencies and behavior than you could on your own. Your profile will provide an overall emotional intelligence score, scores for personal and social competence, and scores in each of the 4 emotional intelligence skills: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. The results highlight specific actions that are most critical to increasing your emotional intelligence. In your online report, you will see a specific analysis of the behaviors that contributed to your results. Each skill is further illustrated through e-learning activities that bring emotional intelligence to life via clips from Hollywood movies, television, and real-world events. A goal tracking system summarizes the skills you are working on and provides automatic reminders via email to help you stay focused. You will also learn how your scores compare to other people's. You will see what percentage of the population you scored higher than, and how your scores compare to those of specific groups with which you share certain characteristics. You can ask your report to contrast your scores with others based on gender, region of the world, job type, and job title. For example, you might discover how you compare to other women in their 40s who hold a vice president of sales title at a company in North America. How do I take the test? It's simple. Inside the CD wallet that contains this audiobook is a label printed with a code. This is a unique ID code specifically for you. If you've purchased the download version of this audiobook from audible.com, the code will be emailed to you. Write the code down somewhere and hop onto a computer with internet access. Visit the page www.eiquickbook.com to take your test. Click the gray button in the middle of the page that says, "I'm ready." When the system asks for your ID code, you will need to type in your unique code. You can type the letters in capital or lowercase. It does not matter. To complete the test, you will need a computer with internet access, a web browser, and a 288K or faster modem. Very few people find the test questions difficult or stressful to complete. Since the test asks simple questions about your behavior, you already have all the answers. Follow the instructions on the page and think about how you are in many situations, not just the ones you handle well. When you complete the test, it will instantly create your score profile. You will see your results immediately and can return to view them anytime. The system will also let you print your results and save them as a document on your computer. How much time you spend reviewing your score profile and participating in the online activities is up to you. Some people spend just 10 or 20 minutes reading through their results. Others spend more time using the related activities available. Chapter 4. Important Questions. 7 Key Questions. Getting Started. The end of understanding is not to prove and find reasons, but to know and believe. Thomas Carlyle. We find the people who make the most progress in improving their emotional intelligence are usually the ones who ask the most questions. A question is the child of curiosity, and topics that can generate this level of interest are worthy of exploration. Too often, questions are viewed as a sign of doubt and lack of faith in the subject of the inquisition. We realize that challenging questions come from a desire to know more. To this end, we have tracked the 7 most common inquiries about emotional intelligence, and the answers follow. Can my emotional intelligence change? Emotional intelligence skills change as you do. Unlike regular intelligence and personality, your emotional intelligence is a flexible skill that you can choose to improve. It is also influenced by significant life circumstances. You may see it fluctuate in response to losing a job, getting a divorce, being promoted unexpectedly, or other major life events. The real trick is to understand your emotional intelligence skills, keep an eye on them, and use them to your benefit. Your scores on the test included with this audiobook should not be treated as the final verdict on your emotional intelligence skills. Instead, use them to see where you stand today. They will help you know if you are headed in the right direction. The more you work to hone your emotional intelligence skills, the more you will find your scores ending up where you want them to be. When you work to improve your emotional intelligence, it will take a few months to begin seeing a lasting change. Learning to pause during your day and think differently in response to your surroundings is all it takes to get started. Some new behaviors are easy to initiate quickly, and people will notice the change in you immediately. Shifting your focus to emotional intelligence can give you a new perspective that will make it hard not to change. Like learning any new skill, improving your emotional intelligence takes practice, and most people see a measurable change 3 to 6 months after they start working on a new skill. After you spend a few months putting the skills you'll learn in chapters 5 to 8 into practice, it's a good idea to test your emotional intelligence again to see where your scores improved. If emotional intelligence is so important, why are some people successful who seem to have none? Just about every office has someone who meets this description. He doesn't get along well with other people. Most conversations begin with tension and easily end in some type of conflict. Approaching him with a question is about as comfortable as listening to someone drag his or her fingernails down a chalkboard. Yet somehow, this person is good at getting things done. Many of these people are leaders who are particularly abrasive with those who work for them. The first thing to realize is that emotional intelligence and success do not always occur together. People can use their intellect to get results without being successful in dealing with other people, but in failing to use social competence, they don't realize their full potential. When you work with people like this, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that they succeed through personal competence. Many of the same people who are bristly to speak to are really good at motivating themselves to get work done. They may not manage their behavior with other people well, but they can power through a dreary task. It's a side of emotional intelligence that is private, yet it's only one side. These folks typically have a low overall emotional intelligence score. It's important to understand that the success they've obtained has been enabled by a certain level of self-management and likely a good deal of intellect. Difficult people who achieve a lot are in the minority, however. About 90% of top performers are high in emotional intelligence. How many emotional intelligence skills should I work on at one time? The human mind can focus effectively on only a few behaviors at a time. An attempt to improve all 4 emotional intelligence skills in a single effort are bound to fail. You should work on one emotional intelligence skill at a time. That will require you to focus on changing a few key behaviors to get results. As an example, if you choose to work on self-management, you should not spend your time thinking, I need to self-manage, I need to self-manage. Rather, you need to hatch a plan that incorporates specific actions into your routine. You might make an effort to consider multiple options before reaching decisions. Or you might try not to brush people off when you're having a bad day. Each of these behaviors is a significant new challenge. Only once you've mastered them should you move on to something new. It's also important to remember that the 4 emotional intelligence skills have a good deal of overlap with one another. If you begin working on self-management, your other skills are likely to improve as well. Citing the example from the paragraph above, you clearly have to self-manage in order to learn not to brush people off when something is bothering you. This will also improve your relationships, increasing your relationship management score. You also might find along the way that focusing on other people's perspective makes it easier to avoid brushing them off. Doing so will create an improvement in your social awareness. So even the most ambitious people should trust that working diligently on a single skill will take you far. The 4 emotional intelligence skills will work together for your benefit. Should I let other people know that I am working on my emotional intelligence? If you feel comfortable doing so, you should share your goals with at least one person you trust. If that person is even the least bit supportive, you will find that he or she is a boon to your efforts. When you make a goal public, even by simply telling someone else what you're working on, you are 10 times more likely to achieve that goal. Just putting it out there creates a new level of accountability. Other people will also be an important source of information as you monitor your progress. They can describe how they see your efforts taking effect. There are some people whom you may not want to tell, and this is usually for the best. In order for you to benefit from sharing your goals with another person, that person has to be willing to engage in a comfortable and constructive collaboration. If the person you tell isn't going to take the time to understand or is just going to give you a hard time about it, you are better off working on your emotional intelligence goals privately. If you take the emotional intelligence appraisal, your scores will be protected and we will not show them to anyone under any circumstances. Your ability to access them will be password protected, ensuring that another person using your computer will not be able to see them. We believe that personal development should be as private as you want it to be. From time to time, qualified behavioral scientists from TalentSmart do conduct research on the anonymous database. They are bound to the ethical standards required of those trained in this profession and see only blocks of numbers without identifying information. Can emotional intelligence be used to manipulate people? Yes. The power of emotional intelligence is not lost on those who use these skills to manipulate others. Unfortunately, there is nothing to stop people from using emotional intelligence for ill gain. A prime example of someone using emotional intelligence to manipulate another occurs in the movie Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. The movie is a true story based on the life of Frank Abagnale, played by DiCaprio, a successful young check counterfeiter who has attracted the attention of the FBI. Hanks plays an FBI agent, Carl Hanratty, who has tracked the counterfeiter to a Los Angeles hotel room without a clue as to what he looks like. When Agent Hanratty enters the room with his gun drawn, he finds a man who claims to be a CIA agent. Hanratty aggressively questions the man without lowering his gun. The imposter searches the room, explaining that the CIA has long been on the case and that Agent Hanratty is too late. The fugitive is already on the run. But the CIA agent is really the fugitive, and he eventually convinces Hanratty of his story. He uses a couple of tricks along the way, but his success ultimately comes from maintaining a calm demeanor. He's so good at managing his anxiety about getting caught that he appears relaxed and calm. Hanratty assumes that there is no way he could be the fugitive and eventually lets his guard down. Abagnale escapes when Agent Hanratty lets him walk out of the room to carry some evidence to his car. In real life, emotional intelligence helped Frank Abagnale narrowly escape the clutches of the FBI. Does emotional intelligence have anything to do with age? Emotional intelligence scores tend to increase with age. Most people increase in self-awareness throughout their lifetime and have an easier time managing their emotions and behavior as they age. People in their 50s, on average, score 25% higher on our test than those in their 20s. Most people tend to gain a few emotional intelligence points with every decade of life. While there is a natural increase in emotional intelligence for most people as they age, the key is to maximize your emotional intelligence at every age. In a matter of months, you can realize an increase in your emotional intelligence that might not otherwise happen for a decade. Can I give my kids the emotional intelligence appraisal? The emotional intelligence appraisal test questions are written for anyone with the equivalent of an 8th grade education. The test scores will be descriptive only for those who can read at this level. Younger children, regardless of reading level, typically lack the maturity needed to benefit from an emotional intelligence test. The results are reliable in a variety of settings. You don't need to hold a job to measure your emotional intelligence. For example, We are aware of many high school teachers and university professors who have their students take the test as part of a self-development process to understand their capabilities outside of regular intelligence. 3. How to increase your emotional intelligence. Chapter 5. Changing your mind. Your brain is plastic. Can I really change my brain? Human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, can change the outer aspects of their lives. William James. I met Richard Lacina in such an unremarkable way. He came by our office one Friday to work on our computer network, representing a company referred by a friend. When it was my computer's turn to get fixed, I moved to the couch in my office so he could get to work. As he punched away on the keyboard, he eyed a Ken Blanchard book that had made its way to my floor. He told me he was a Blanchard fan and had read all of Ken's books. As most of my current projects end up on the floor, I enthusiastically explained that we were working with Ken to create a leadership assessment. Our conversation progressed while the software loaded, and I privately wondered how a guy who fixes computer networks for a living had developed such an intense interest in leadership. He had read more than Ken Blanchard. He had read every single business book I mentioned over the course of the hour. I must have done a poor job of hiding my curiosity, because it wasn't long before he told me his story. Richard had moved to town 9 years earlier with nothing but a careful business plan, a beat-up 1978 Dodge pickup, and a knowledge of computer networks. At that time, you couldn't even find computer networking listed as a service in the phone book. He eventually grew a business from meetings in his apartment in one of the worst neighborhoods in the city to a nationwide enterprise that collected more than $1 million a week in consulting fees. He won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award, was featured in the New York Times, USA Today, and Maxim, and was interviewed on television by Fox and ABC News. I blurted out the obvious question, "Then why are you here working on my computer?" The short answer was, discipline. The long answer was that he had sold his stake in the company and was now just 2 months into doing it all over again. He had just 9 employees in the new enterprise, and all of his technicians were committed to other jobs. He was filling in to earn our business. Richard had not always been the model of discipline he used to make his company great. After barely graduating from high school, he threw his belongings into a backpack and pedaled his bicycle 102 miles to join his girlfriend at the University of North Carolina. Once there, he didn't have much to do while she was in class, so he spent his days in the library. Business books captured the bulk of his attention, and he read about the names etched on the archway outside the library. These were entrepreneurs who had made it big. To get your name in the archway, you had to win the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. He was struck most by their commitment to discipline and planning. He admired their achievements and vowed that one day his name would be etched in the archway outside the library. The books touted the merits of perseverance and planning. He wanted to develop those skills and be successful, so each day he worked diligently on a business plan. A year later, he had finalized his plan and moved out to San Diego to get started. The only apartment he could afford in the city came complete with a security system. He wedged his truck against the front door each night to keep himself in and the unsavory elements of his neighborhood out. He dedicated himself to building his business installing computer networks, and he found out quickly that keeping things on track required every ounce of devotion he could muster. He couldn't even take a day off. A missed day meant missed customers. His dependability quickly earned him the favor of local businesses seeking reliable networks. Sticking to his business plan was not as simple as it had looked on paper. There were frequently obstacles in his path, each of which required new levels of preparation and focus. Each time the business reached a new milestone, challenges surfaced that tested his resolve. Though at times he felt he was on the verge of cracking, he never did. Today, he reflects on how he taught himself discipline. It was really hard for me in the beginning. There were a lot of little things that I had no idea you needed to do to run a business. But as I stayed focused, I found it got easier and easier to keep on track. I guess I trained my brain. As time passed, the discipline he developed turned from something new into something natural. It led him to my office the day I met him, and it helped him get his name etched among the greats in the archway. In 1991, a couple of years before Richard hopped onto his bike and pedaled to the University of North Carolina, a study was published in Science that threw everything neurologists knew about the brain on end. The amazing revelation? That your brain is plastic. This might not seem like the most appealing term for your brain until you consider a plastic fork. When you press one against a table, it bends easily in response to the pressure. Under the same amount of pressure, however, a metal fork remains rigid and unresponsive. Like the plastic fork, the cells in your brain have the flexibility to adjust to influences from the outside world. They do not bend back and forth as a fork does, but they grow new ways to communicate with one another in response to changing circumstances. Plasticity is the term neurologists now use to describe the brain's ability to adjust to pressure and change. As Richard tolerated the discomfort that came with sticking to his long-term plan, he literally changed his brain. The more he continued on his path and surmounted new challenges, the more his brain formed connections that reinforced these acts of discipline. He wasn't aware of the mechanism behind this change, but over time, he felt things getting easier. Each time he forced himself out of his comfort zone, he had less trouble the next time he faced a similar challenge. For decades, the world held the mistaken belief that the adult brain is frozen and unable to change. The study published in Science debunked this myth by revealing that learning leaves a physical mark on the brain at any age. Fresh connections in your brain make it more comfortable to use new behaviors. Your brain grows new connections much as your biceps might swell if you started curling heavy weights several times a week. The change is gradual, and the weight becomes easier and easier to lift the longer you stick to your routine. Your brain can't swell like your biceps since it's confined by your skull, so instead, the brain cells develop new connections to speed the efficiency of thought without increasing its size. Each of your brain's 100 billion cells communicates by branching off small arms, much like a tree branch, to reach out to other cells. A single cell can grow 15,000 connections with its neighbors. As you develop new skills, the cells in the affected area branch out in a chain reaction of growth. The pathway of thought responsible for the behavior grows strong, making it easier to kick this new resource into action in the future. As we pointed out in Chapter 1, your emotional intelligence is a product of the amount of communication between the rational and emotional centers of your brain. When you practice your emotional intelligence skills, you strengthen this pathway. Your cells literally branch out and grow connections between your feelings and your reason, but it takes time. This means that if you typically yell when you are feeling angry, for example, you have to learn to choose an alternative reaction. You must practice this new reaction many times before it will replace the urge to yell. In the beginning, doing something other than yelling when you are angry will be extremely difficult, but each time you succeed, the new pathway is strengthened. Eventually, the urge to yell is so small that it's easy to ignore. To build your emotional intelligence skills, make sure the road between the rational and emotional centers of your brain is a well-traveled one. Learning that lasts. How can I move from motivation to a lasting change? We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Aristotle. A chief criticism of motivational seminars is their ability to motivate. The speaker energizes and entertains the audience. They decide to make a major life change and feel that things are going to be different from now on. But the return to business as usual lacks follow-through. Nothing changes. What happened? Was it all just a bunch of hype? How can you make a lasting change? Imagine, if you will, that you are watching a television special about children who are horribly sick. They need blood to get better, but there aren't enough donors who have their extremely rare AB negative blood type. Tears well up in your eyes as the program closes. You turn off your television and vow to donate blood once a month because you have the AB negative blood type. That very week, you find the time to get to the blood bank on your lunch hour. But you find the time to do it only once more that year. Eventually, you quit struggling to fit it into your hectic schedule, and you stop thinking about it altogether. Why does this happen? Are you just a bad person, too weak to remember those poor, sick children? Every time you are enticed into adopting a new behavior, you do so because you are motivated by the effects of emotion. You turned off the television that night deeply saddened by the plight of the sick children and motivated to help them. But your emotional state was transient. It faded with time, as it was directly tied to the strong emotions generated by the program. Months later, when you tried to squeeze in a trip to the blood bank, you did not have the same level of emotion that originally drove the behavior. Because your motivation was induced by a brief and dramatic experience, you can't count on it to create a lasting change. In order for a new behavior to last, you have to practice it enough to make it permanent. You have to train your brain to adopt the behavior, and that comes only with practice. If you were to tape the television special with the sick children and watch it once a month, your chances of getting to the blood bank would increase. And if you could just make it to the blood bank a few months in a row, it's likely that your brain would adjust and new neural pathways would form to support the behavior. Suddenly, saving sick children would become a habit. Train your brain. Each year on New Year's Day, more than 200 million Americans attempt to change their behavior in some way. The calendar change is a perfect time to wipe the slate clean, and it motivates people to begin the process of making a change. But most people never move beyond the exciting rush of the year's first few weeks. By February 1st, more than 130 million New Year's resolutions fail, as the emotional state that produced them subsides. A third of people who make resolutions keep them all year by diligently moving through the critical first 6 months of practice. If you practice a behavior long enough, it takes hold and perpetuates itself. It can require tremendous effort to get a new behavior going, but once you train your brain, it becomes a habit. Studies have demonstrated a lasting change in emotional intelligence more than 6 years after new skills were first adopted. Routine behaviors last because you no longer have to think about them. You enjoy them years later because they have become a natural part of your repertoire. As you learn new strategies for improving your emotional intelligence in the subsequent chapters of this audiobook, remember that practice makes perfect. You won't increase your emotional intelligence simply by deciding to do things differently. You'll have to practice new behaviors repeatedly before they'll become your own. This process will strengthen the pathway between your emotions and your reason. If you practice long enough, you'll train your brain to adopt these behaviors as successful habits. Repetition of new, more emotionally intelligent behaviors will move you out of the phase of temporary motivation and into a lasting skill you can call your own. Chapter 6. Building your skills. Personal competence. Improving how you understand and manage yourself. You don't drown by falling in the water. You drown by staying there. Edwin Lewis Cole. Ray Charles, soul singer, songwriter, composer, and musician, learned to lean into extreme discomfort. It was the secret of his personal competence and professional success. He was a rare talent who crossed over musical styles, and his work is immortalized in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Jazz Hall of Fame, and the Blues Foundation Hall of Fame. All this from a guy whose childhood could have destroyed him. Living in poverty with his mother and younger brother during the height of the Depression, Ray didn't have much in the world. When he was 5 years old, his younger brother drowned in an oversized washtub. Later that same year, he began to lose his ability to see. In 2 short years, he was completely blind. 7 years later, when he was away at a state-run school for the blind, his mother died in her sleep at the age of 32. He described his mother's death in his autobiography as the most devastating thing in my whole experience, bar nothing, period. From that moment on, I was completely in another world. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I was totally out of it. The big problem was, I couldn't cry. I couldn't get the sorrow out of my system, and that made things worse. An elderly woman in town, Ma Beck, knew Ray's family well and saw how withdrawn he became after his mother's death. She literally took him aside one day and told him that his mother would have wanted him to carry on with his life and use his talent. When he described this event later as an adult, he told about crying for the first time in her arms, howling like a tiny infant, crying for all the pain that had been stored up, crying for the loss and the grief and the sweet memories that Mama had given me. That day, he leaned into his extreme pain, and eventually he used it in his music. He said that those events were, strangely enough, extraordinarily positive for me. What I've accomplished since then, really, grows out of my coming to terms with those events. Howling screams became one of his trademark contributions to popular music. Personal competence is knowing yourself and doing the most you can with what you have. It's not about being perfect or having complete control of your emotions. Rather, it's about allowing your feelings to inform you and to guide your behavior. Ray's emotions helped him make powerful music. He didn't develop personal competence easily. It took years. In the process, he overcame drug addiction and embattled relationships. Over time, Ray fully realized the ability to let his sorrow join the music welling up inside him. He enjoyed an amazing life and career, guided by all of his emotions. Lean into the discomfort. As shown by our own research, the biggest obstacle to increased personal competence is the tendency to avoid the discomfort that comes from increasing your self-awareness. More than 2/3 of the people we have tested have great difficulty admitting their shortcomings. Things you do not think about are off your radar for a reason. They can sting when they surface. Avoiding this pain creates problems because it is a short-term fix. Leaning into your discomfort is the only way to change. You cannot manage yourself adequately if you ignore what you need to do to change. Rather than avoiding a feeling, your goal should be to move toward it, into it, and eventually through it. This can be said for even mild emotional discomfort, such as boredom, confusion, or anticipation. When you ignore or minimize an emotion, no matter how small or insignificant, you miss the opportunity to do something productive with it. Even worse, ignoring your feelings does not make them go away. It just helps them to surface again when you least expect it. Business thought leader Peter Drucker says that to better manage oneself, each of us needs to discover our own arrogance. We all have things we dismiss as being too unimportant for us to bother learning more about. In the realm of personal competence, one person thinks that apologies are for sissies, so she never learns to recognize when one is called for. Another person hates feeling down, so he spends all his time being the life of the party. Both of these people need to take the bold step of moving into the feelings that will enable a change. Otherwise, they will continue down an unproductive, unsatisfying path, repeating the same patterns over and over again. After the first few times you allow yourself to focus on discomfort, you will quickly find that the discomfort isn't so bad, it doesn't ruin you, and it reaps rewards. For instance, the medical student in college who is shy should start practicing early on how to overcome his aversion to saying hi to those around him, because developing a rapport with his patients will be essential to his success. He will have to be the one to say hello first. To learn to do so, he has to become aware of his aversion and the importance of overcoming it. The surprising thing about increasing your self-awareness is that just thinking about it will help you change, even though much of your focus will initially be on the things you do wrong. Don't be afraid of your emotional mistakes. They tell you what you should be doing differently and provide the steady stream of information you need to understand yourself as life unfolds. To improve your ability to recognize emotions, consider the range of emotions people express. We have so many words to describe the feelings that surface in life, yet all emotions are derivations of 5 core feelings: happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and shame. The complexity of these emotions is revealed when you look at how they are expressed in varying forms of intensity. Can you think of examples from your own life that demonstrate each degree of intensity for the 5 core emotions? To become more personally competent, identify which emotions you tend to feel more often than others. This will raise your emotional self-awareness and provide a guide as to how you might manage these emotions when they surface. Feeling a range of emotions is not the same as self-awareness. To accurately recognize an emotion, you also have to pay attention to your internal thermostat, the thoughts and physical signs that accompany a feeling. These signs are not the feelings themselves, but the beliefs and sensations that accompany them. High self-awareness is recognizing the sensations that you feel and being able to name which emotion is happening. Everyone's thermostat reads differently. Thoughts and physical sensations are your perfectly normal responses to emotionally arousing situations. Your thoughts might speed up or your mind go blank. You might feel hot, cold, or numb. Your heart might skip a beat or race. You might feel muscle tension or see with tunnel vision. Your throat might feel tight or you might notice tingling in a limb. An executive we know gives a great description of the physical signs that accompany his anger. When someone tells me a decision I made is dumb, my sensations are always the same. I feel my chest get hot and turn red. Since I wear a shirt and tie all day, no one but me can tell when it happens. The same is true with your tendencies. How you usually respond to various situations and people is unique to you. One of the universally uncomfortable feelings people have as they work on personal competence is the feeling of being unfinished, of not yet mastering it. We fear making a mistake in front of others who might see us practicing. Personal development requires making many mistakes, even though it is uncomfortable to recognize when we make them. We catch ourselves getting carried away, or maybe we catch ourselves trying to repress our emotions and turn them off. These are the moments when we need to try something different. Working on emotional intelligence skills requires that we take responsibility for our part of the difficulties we face. Practicing emotional intelligence skills is how we become sophisticated in our ability to spot and use emotions to our advantage in every situation possible. The people we know who are extremely emotionally intelligent are simply the people who got a head start in this process. They may have started at an early age, as Ray Charles did, when life experiences threw them challenges to deal with. They likely made mistakes along the way and found their challenges as tough as those you currently face. Rest assured, they too have many stories of failed early attempts to develop emotional intelligence. Now they appear to be cruising, and their skills appear easily acquired, even magically maintained. Don't be fooled. People high in emotional intelligence have been leaning into their discomfort, making mistakes, practicing, and getting better at their skills for years. If you are one of these people, we encourage you to think about where you can focus your efforts on a situation that is particularly important to you right now. We all have something that we are ignoring. If you are like the rest of us, new to the idea of emotional intelligence, yet filled with life experience, you will benefit from leaning into the discomfort of your emotions by using the following techniques. Manage your tendencies. Recently, we talked with a room of people about their life experiences with each of the emotional intelligence skills. We asked them what works best in managing their behavior. 3 men from the group sang the praises of becoming more comfortable with telling people what they don't like to do. Specifically, they meant speaking up at work and admitting that they didn't like being involved in certain kinds of projects and weren't even very good at them. For them, self-management was overcoming the discomfort of admitting a flaw. It meant being assertive instead of sitting quietly and agreeing to do whatever was asked of them. All 3 men were in their late 40s and early 50s, and it had taken the bulk of their careers for them to take this action. Before they could make a move, they had to learn their tendencies and then overcome the fear of being perceived as uncooperative. Self-management is more than resisting an explosive or problematic behavior. Perhaps the biggest challenge that people face is managing their tendencies over time and applying their skills in a variety of situations. Obvious and momentary opportunities for self-control, for example, "I'm so mad at that darn dog," are the easiest to spot and manage. Real results come from putting your momentary needs on hold to pursue larger, more important goals. The realization of such goals is often delayed, meaning that your commitment to self-management will be tested over and over again. Those who manage themselves the best are able to see things through without cracking. Success comes to those who can put their needs on hold and continually manage their tendencies. If you are just beginning to recognize your patterns of emotion and discomfort, write down some of the things that you see, do, think, and feel in situations that are upsetting or overwhelming for you. This will help you to discover what behaviors you fall victim to when your emotions get the best of you. Talk to friends and colleagues to gain further insight. They can help you recognize your patterns and make the connection between something that happens and the way you respond. This description may just be the missing link you need. Leaning into the discomfort of self-management also includes planning for the discomfort ahead of time. If you anticipate having a difficult conversation with the director of the PTA at your child's school, take a few minutes to plan how you are going to handle your frustration. Decide what you will and will not say. If every time you walk into the local electronic warehouse you get excited about the new gadgets there and leave with something you really didn't need or can't afford, plan your strategy for dealing with the disappointment of leaving empty-handed. Your tendencies when faced with strong emotion are an important part of who you are. Just as preparation for a marathon leads to better performance, preparation for a difficult situation improves your ability to manage yourself in the moment. When you can't plan ahead because the discomfort of an emotion surprises you, pause before doing anything in response to it. You might need a few seconds, a day, or weeks. If you need just a few moments, take a deep breath. When emotions run strong, it is best to slow down and think a bit before moving forward. If your teenage son pushes you with that one phrase that makes you feel something close to rage, the best thing to do is to take a deep breath, say you can't talk right now, and leave the room to find space to think and calm down. It may require leaving the house for a while before you return and respond. Managing your tendencies requires you to have some perspective on an emotion-arousing situation and then acting on it. If you are cut off while approaching an intersection, you might feel an impulse to tailgate the car in front of you to show your disapproval of the other person's inept driving and thank him or her for putting you in danger. But if you stop to think for a moment, you will realize that tailgating is going to put you in more danger than you are in now. If the other driver slams on the brakes, you will have less time to stop. Violent road rage on the part of the other driver also isn't out of the question. Your emotions are frustration and anger, but you can recognize these feelings. You can reflect and realize that continuing the game of chicken will only prolong them. You can choose to drive on without even looking at the other driver. A couple of minutes later, you are calm again. Your momentary need was revenge, but you have self-managed your counterproductive impulse and can go on with your day. This is personal competence in action. Talking to yourself may seem an odd piece of advice, but self-talk is a powerful method for taking control of your next move, even your next emotion. We do not mean talking to yourself out loud, but privately, inside your head. We all do it, and, whether we know it or not, what we say to ourselves has a tremendous impact on our behavior. If you want to call a girl you know and ask her for a date, you may never do it if the message running inside your head keeps saying, "She is going to say no. Why would she ever want to go out with me?" Self-talk changes the script inside your head to something more enabling, such as, "What have I got to lose? I'm never going to know if I don't call. Who knows? Maybe she'll say yes." The amazing thing about self-talk, because it can sound so childish, is that it's one of the most powerful determinants of what we do. Ray Charles told himself that he had to keep going because his mother would have wanted him to. This is a much more empowering message to have running through your head than, "Why should I bother? My whole family is gone. No one even cares what happens to me." Talking to others is also a great way to understand and manage your tendencies. Ask for advice from someone who may see your behavior a little more objectively. If the situation is extremely difficult or complex, you may want to get third and fourth opinions. There is nothing worse than being bogged down by a single opinion that is just as skewed as your own. The point is not necessarily to ask other people what you should do, but to ask them how they see the situation. Do they see you as being led by your emotions? Do you come across differently than you expect? Other people can give you all the information you need to manage your tendencies and take yourself in the direction you want to go. For Ray Charles, an uninvited second opinion changed his life. Social competence. Listening so people will talk, and talking so people will listen. When dealing with people, remember that you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but creatures of emotion. Dale Carnegie. Rebecca worked for a large retail chain in the Midwest. She loved her job, but her boss constantly pushed her buttons and made the work unbearable. Finally, she approached the vice president of human resources and described her situation. She detailed her boss's two most frustrating habits: cutting her off in the middle of a sentence and always being too busy to meet with her. Rebecca's boss was so unaware of these behaviors that he didn't know that she and other members of his staff were on the brink of leaving the company. The Human Resources VP decided to take action. Rebecca was a valuable employee, and the company didn't want to lose her. Rebecca's situation was easier to solve than you might imagine. The VP of Human Resources was already coaching other managers and decided to meet with Rebecca's boss to give him feedback on his emotional intelligence skills. First, she initiated a 360-degree survey to gather feedback from his staff. Each member of his staff had the opportunity to anonymously answer questions online about the boss's skill in dealing with people and managing his behavior. When he reviewed his emotional intelligence scores during the coaching session, he was shocked by the feedback. He had no clue that his social skills were a problem for those who worked for him. Like many people who are extremely low in social competence, he wasn't aware of how people reacted to him. He and the VP of Human Resources worked through a plan whereby he would take two simple actions to improve this skill. He would pause and listen when his employees spoke to him, and he would carve out time to meet regularly with his staff without interruptions. Though he was a bit robotic about it at first, the skills were simple enough to adopt. For Rebecca, these two simple changes made all the difference. He didn't become the perfect boss, but she appreciated his effort and felt more comfortable working for him. He took the time to meet with her regularly, and she could tell he was listening when she spoke to him. She was relieved that he could master these two activities. In a little over a month, they turned the situation around, and Rebecca decided to stay with the company. How to listen so people will talk. Listening is the most important thing you can do to build social awareness. It's also really hard work and requires a unique blend of self-management and multitasking. To listen well, we have to stop doing many things we like to do. We have to stop talking, stop the monologue that may be running through our mind, stop anticipating the point the other person is about to make, and stop thinking ahead to what we are going to say next. At home, this will likely involve something simple, such as muting the television, or setting down your book and turning to the family member who is talking to you. At work, it can be done by closing your door, turning off your cell phone, and putting down your documents to face the person who is talking. Your silence and attention are all it will take to get the other person talking. When you remove all the discouraging barriers from conversation, people feel respected and heard. People take in information from their world through the 5 senses: taste, touch, smell, sight, and sound. Most of us take in the majority of information about our interactions with others through just 2 of the senses, hearing and seeing. This offers us just two sources of information to assess what is really going on. Your sixth sense is your perception of emotions, and it's the most important way of gathering information during an interaction with another person. Consider the last time you were talking to someone and the words made logical sense, but something subtle about the conversation made things awkward. Perhaps you felt that the other person was just going through the motions and wasn't really happy to be there talking. It probably made you feel distant or ignored. Such feelings are critical to your observation of the situation. They are real pieces of information you can use to adjust your reaction and determine the best course of action. One thing you can do to learn to listen, so people will talk, is become an anthropologist. Anthropologists make their living watching others in their natural state, without letting their own thoughts and feelings disturb the observation. This is social awareness in its purest form. You can play the anthropologist's role anytime by keeping surveillance on your mind. The surveillance approach is a simple way to distract your mind from your own thoughts and feelings. It will help you focus on what is happening around you, and people will respond well to your attention. You'll also understand more about what people are saying and doing, as well as why they act the way they do. You'll be surprised by what you notice about others when your thoughts are more on them than on yourself. It takes practice to identify what another person is feeling and understand how those feelings are influencing his or her behavior. This is the challenge in developing the social awareness skills of social competence. Professional poker players spend inordinate amounts of time learning to read the subtlest of cues coming from one another. You don't have to go this far, because people are visibly influenced by their emotions all the time. To develop your social awareness skills, all you have to do is pay attention to their body language, tone and volume of voice, and speed of movement. These will give you the information you need to determine how they are feeling. Be sure to ask questions when you aren't sure what's going on with the other person. It's an easy way to improve the accuracy of your perception, and it makes people feel good to know you are paying attention. A simple clarifying question such as, "Does this mean you're disappointed?" is an incredible tool and will help you avoid misinterpreting the other person's experience. How to talk so people will listen. The weaker a connection you have with someone, the harder it is to get your point across. If you want people to listen, you have to practice relationship management and seek benefits from every relationship, especially the challenging ones. The difference between an interaction and a relationship is a matter of frequency. It's a product of the quality, depth, and time you spend interacting with another person. When you first meet someone, your time together may be brief, and the quality and depth will be relatively superficial. As you build a history with this person, a relationship will start to form. Whether it becomes a surface relationship, a genuine friendship, or anything in between, will depend upon your ability to manage interactions. Now we'll focus on your part in the equation. First, discover what role emotions play in your interactions with others. Emotions play a part in every discussion between people, no matter how light. Whether your mood is good or bad, excited or bored, think about how it affects the back and forth between you and the other person. If you notice when your feelings are taking over, you will be much less confused by the interaction. If the other person is someone who can join you in leaning into the discomfort, you can talk about it together to prevent problems in the future. There will always be times where bringing up emotions is a mistake, bad timing, or just not the other person's cup of tea. But you can usually recognize these situations by using your social awareness skills. If you can take a moment to stop and talk about what is really going on, it will diffuse the power of the feelings. There is no need to play shrink with the other person. Just mention what you are seeing and ask if there is another way the two of you can tackle the problem in light of this information. Be careful not to point a finger or avoid your part in the problem. The goal is to find a balance among what you hear being said, how it is being said, and the feelings that are emanating from both parties. To find out how emotions are involved in every interaction between two people, tune in to even the most benign events. Conversations about weekend errands, discussions of family gatherings, debates over current events, and negotiations sometimes stall for no apparent reason. Things usually fall apart when personal attachments, "We spent the holiday with your family last year," get in the way of resolution. The parties involved will continue to disagree until the emotional involvement is addressed. When it is the other person who is being emotional, attend to what he or she is feeling without being threatening. In addressing the other person's feelings, you must try to be supportive, whether or not you agree with his or her actions. Being too direct in addressing the other person's feelings will usually lead to defensiveness. When you are the one who is becoming emotional, try your best to take responsibility for your half of the problem. If you need more time to understand your emotions or even to calm down, ask for it politely and assertively. Things will likely go more smoothly when you can accurately explain what you are feeling. There is no middle ground for emotions. When they happen, they have either a positive or a negative impact on every interaction between two people. Therefore, it is always important to show when you care. If you have a genuine interest in someone, do not hide it, even if there are only certain things you like about him or her. People like people who like them, and they enjoy positive feedback. People will always remember a compliment that is well thought out, accurate, and sincere. Whenever you show you care, you help other people to better understand what is important to you. The extra time you take to offer help, support, encouragement, or interest will be time well spent. It will go a long way in building a relationship.